Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tejas. Yeah, we're going to talk about web accessibility, specifically testing and how to find accessibility issues. But again, let me introduce myself. My name is Adrián. I'm from Spain. I work as an accessibility software engineer at GitHub, where I try to advocate for the accessibility principles, especially in development. And you can find me almost everywhere under my surname. So accessibility, and probably the first question that I got always asked is, what is this A11Y that we always see? How many people knows what A11Y is? Good. This is because there's 11 letters between the A and the Y in the word accessibility, the same as I18N in internationalization. So you're gonna see this a lot now, so you know what that means. Why is so obvious in the real world that those 4 situations are completely wrong, right? In the first situation, in the 2 first situations, we see a very steep ramp. In the third situation, we see a ramp at the end. There are stairs, and the 4th situation is a completely useless one. Let me put you another example. Someone arrives with a wheelchair. There's an accessible button, super good. The doors open automatically. Surprise. Yes. There are stairs at the end. So why is it seems obvious that either the one who implemented this is not disabled, or the testing phase of those products were not done correctly. So it is so obvious in the real world, but when we move to the online world, it's not that obvious that a website is accessible or not. So when we talk about web accessibility, we talk about web tools, websites, technologies that are designed for everyone to be used, not to exclude anyone. Let me put you an example of this. You go to your favorite online e-commerce shop, let's call it Jungle, Amazon was taken. So you want to see your latest purchases, and you call the support team, and then they can tell you something, you need to click in the button in the top right corner. Or you want to change your email address, and you don't find where it is, so they can tell you, you need to click in the button with the engine icon. But for someone who is blind, there's no such a button who looks like an engine icon, or there's no such a top right corner. They don't use a mouse for that. So we need to have this in mind when we develop our applications. It might be that we wrongly associate web accessibility only with visually impaired people, but there are other types of impairments. We have touch, hear, see, or speak impairments, and we can categorize it as permanent, temporary, or situational. So in the case of visually impaired people, we can see that permanent is someone who is blind, temporary is someone with a eye injured, like a cataract, or maybe a distracted driver. You're driving, you look to talk to the co-pilot, then you are disabled towards the road. But it's true that I'm going to focus on visually impaired people. A bit of small numbers. In 2021, we were around 7.9 billion people, and more than 2.2 billion people are visually impaired, or any kind, blind, colorblind, protanopia, uses glasses, blurry vision, any kind of visually impaired. So when we develop, when we create our online businesses, we want to reach as mass people as possible. And those are our users as well. Okay, let's talk about testing now. Testing is awesome. Automate tests are super cool. They can free up your QA team for manually testing everything, but they're not magic. Because only from 20 to 50%, I always say 20 to 50, but it's more 20 to 30% of the accessibility issues can be found with automate tests. And we need to include these automate tests in a larger phase of testing where manual tests are as important as automate tests. So I'm going to tell you a bit of what works for me every day, or what has worked for me during those years every day. And I'm going to pass from code to browser, terminal, and I'm going to end up with manual tests. So the first thing that I can tell you is test your code while you develop. we can use tools that shows us the issues in the browser, or we can test directly in the code editor. So the first tool that I want to show you is Axe. Axe is a accessibility engine built by DQ, and they provide a React library. Someone did a Vue library, and for those who develop in Angular, you can use directly the protractor with the WebDriver.js that Axe provides. So let's see how it works. You need to install it as a developer dependency in your application, and you have to be sure that you only import and use this library in an environment that is not a production environment. So you don't want to publicly expose those vulnerabilities. What is this tool doing? Well, the tool is exposing those vulnerabilities in the console log of your developer tools in the browser. And what we can see here is which element of your HTML is provoking the issue. What is the issue? We have the severity level from minor, moderate, serious, so we can see if we need to act immediately, or we can create an issue and work a bit later or put it in the backlog. And it is grouped by appearances. So if you have the same error multiple times, then it's grouped. We have ESLint. So if you use linters, you can have the plugin for the accessibility rules. You just need to include the plugin, okay? Install it as a developer dependency again. You need to include the plugin, and you need to extend the rules for the recommended accessibility rules. That means that when you go to the code editor, in this case I'm using VS Code, you can see this underline red wavy, and this is the linter is telling you that in this line there's something wrong. You hover, and then you have the pop-up with what is the error. So those are the two things that there are multiple other tools, but those are two tools that you can start using now to test while your code. And of course, the linter you can use as well. You can see the issues as well in the terminal. If you're testing a design system or a component library and you use Storybook, which is an amazing library, I wrote an article about how to test the accessibility of the components in a more isolated environment like Storybook. Use the development tools of the browser. Now we move to the browser, and well, the browsers now come with a lot and good tools. I'm gonna show you Chromium, either Edge or Chrome, and Firefox. So the first one that I want to show you is the color picker. So when you inspect a text element, let's say a button with a text element inside, then you have the CSS color in the styles tab. If you click there's a small square with the color. If you click in the color, you get the color picker. And there is a tab in set color contrast ratio. This contrast ratio is the ratio between the color of the text and the color of the background where the text is located. So the text is in the button. You can see that the color contrast between those two are not passing either the AA or the AAA contrast ratio test. Those are values that the W3C, which is the organization who sets the standards of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, sets levels for accessibility. You have the same in Firefox, so you can use it in both. The accessibility tab as well in Chromium is very good. You can see the whole accessibility tree, so you can see the accessibility name of an element. So in the computer properties, you can see the order of the computational name. So we can see that the title is the less important thing than the content, for example, an anchor link. So the content of the anchor is more important than an ARIA label, and the ARIA label by is the most important thing. So if there's an ARIA label by and ARIA label by wins. So this is the order of the computational, the accessible name, the same as we see in Firefox. Write your own unit tests, because here all of you write your own unit tests, right? Yeah, good. So Axe has an extension, or Jest as a library. Someone made a library to use Jest. Jest is a testing library for JavaScript. So we install it as a developer dependency as well. And what we are doing here is to write a test with React DOM server. And what I'm doing is transforming my whole application into a string. This string, I'm throwing it to the Axe engine. And of course, I expect to have no violations in the test. So when I run my test in the terminal, I'm going to see those issues the same as I saw with the Chrome React Axe. So we see what is the error, which element is causing the error. And a good thing that I think I forgot to mention, there's a direct link to dquniversity.com. This is the official documentation from DQ that they put for every issue, so you can learn more about how to fix it, and most important, how to not do it again. Good, so we move from code to browser, now we move into the terminal. And another tip is using CLI tools, so command line interface tool, to run accessibility tests. Of course, we are back to Axe family. They develop a CLI tool. You need to install it globally in your machine this time. It's not a project base, it's a global in your machine. And of course, you can run it just simply Axe followed by the URL that you're testing. In this case, I'm testing Stack Overflow. And we can see that it ran in a headless Chrome instance, and we can see pretty much the same results. What is the issue, which element is provoking the issue, and the direct link to DQ University. Another similar tool is PA11Y. Same, we install it globally, and then we use it exactly the same, PA11Y followed by the URL that we want to test. We see pretty much the same results, right? We see which is the error, which element is causing the errors. In this case, we don't have a link to any documentation. It's you who needs to go to Google and find the way to fix this issue. But we have something very important here, which is the principle of the WCAG or the WCAG, which are the guidelines that we are violating. So you can take this one, Google it, and then you have the solution. Of course, you don't have to deploy anything in any URL. You can test it over localhost. But maybe you have a ton of URLs to test. So PA11Y has a CI, so is an extension of the library who's going to look for a config file in your in the root folder of your project, and you can specify an array of URLs. What is it going to do here? We can perform actions. We can click in elements. We can wait for an element with an ID or with a class to load in the screen. We can take screenshots. So it's identifying the 3 URLs, it's taking the test, pretty much the same results. And in the root folder of our application, we can see those screenshots. We can use it for reporting purposes, or if we have a visual regression test tool, we can use it there as well. So it's very, very useful. Another tool is Lighthouse. Lighthouse is a library developed by Google, and it's included in every Chrome browser. But we can use it in the CLI. So same procedure, we install it globally, and then we use it Lighthouse followed by the URL. Now I'm using --view to launch the report after that, but instead of a headless browser, we are gonna see a full instance of Chrome. And we're gonna see a lot of tests, performance, accessibility, low internet, no internet, we see a lot. And at the end, we're gonna see a report. I think you are familiar with this report. We click in accessibility, and we can see in a more graphic way, again, the issues, which issue, what element is causing. Then we have a link to the Google official documentation where we can find more about this. But those all are pretty much the same behavior in the terminal. What can we do with those CLI tools? Well, if you have your code hosted in GitHub, we can use GitHub Actions to automate those accessibility tests in your repository. GitHub Actions are just workflows who execute tasks on demand wherever you tell the GitHub Action to run. So they are YAML files. So, and you need to place them in a GitHub workflows folder. And what I did is creating one GitHub action for each CLI tool, plus the unit test. So I have one for unit test, one for Axe, one for PA11Y, and one for Lighthouse. And what I'm doing is I want every GitHub action to run every time that someone pushes to my main branch, or someone who makes a pull request to my main branch. So every time that someone makes a pull request, we can see those checks at the bottom of the pull request. We can see if they succeed or they failed. And of course, we can click in details and see more about it. So I'm clicking in details in the unit test because it has a red cross. That means it failed. And I can see the terminal where those tests were run. And I can see that there are issues in this pull request about accessibility, so I need to fix them before clicking in merge. Those are the issues, and I can see them, and then I can, again, learn more about it and try to fix it. But if you see, there's one specific check that is green and is not red. This is because Lighthouse is not a testing library, it's a reporting library. So Lighthouse, that means that Lighthouse successfully generated the report, and it's you who need to read the report and act accordingly with the report. So it's you who need to evaluate what is wrong with your website. And for Lighthouse, the report that we already seen, it is generated publicly. So it's going to give you a public URL. If you want to run this into a private repo, or your company wants to do it in a private way, you need to have your Lighthouse report server running. If not, then the URL looks like storage.googleapis.com, and it's going to be public. It's not going to be accessible by anyone who doesn't know the URL, but you need to know that it's public. If you want to see those actions in place, they are in this repository. There's only one pull request. It's not true, there are two pull requests, but one, I made a mistake, so forget about that. And if you want to read more about this, I wrote an article about this, about how to make the pull request disable the merge button until the GitHub actions are all green. So with this one, you avoid putting an inaccessible code in production, or at least in your main branch. Then it's up to you, your CI/CD behavior. Good. We talked about before that only between 20–30% of the accessibility issues can be found with automate tests, which means that we need to include automate tests in a longer way, in a longer process, where manual tests are important. And if we talk about manual tests or simulation tests, we need to talk about screen readers. Screen readers are software programs that allows blind or visually impaired people to read what it is in the screen. They identify what is in the screen, and with a synthesizer is read to the user. Every operating system has their own screen reader built in. Apple, either for iOS or Mac, has VoiceOver. Windows has Narrator. Linux has Orca, and Android has TalkBack. There are other commercial screeners like NVDA or YAWS. But I'm not going to talk about screen readers, because if not, then it will be like 2 hours long. But I'm going to talk about extensions in the browser. I know it says Chrome extension, but every extension that you see here is for Firefox as well. So the first one is Axe again. Dick, you made a very, very good job here. You can find it, this extension, you can find it under the developer tools in your browser, and you just need to click in Analyze. Then it's going to perform a whole test. And what we are going to see here is exactly the same as we saw in React Axe or in the Axe CLI in the terminal, with a more visual thing, right? We can see what is the problem, which element is causing the problem. We can read a bit more about the issue, and we can see this Learn More, which is the link to DQ University to learn more about this. Another very similar extension is ARC Toolkit. You can find that as well under the development tools. And you just need to click in test, run tests. There are a lot of families of elements. I'm clicking in images. And what I can see here is some images don't have alternate text. I can click in the image, and then I go directly to the HTML element. And in the window, they're going to be highlighted. So I can see the very, very good which images doesn't have an alternate text. Accessibility Insights is another very good extension. It's developed by Microsoft. And in this case, I'm going to show you one feature that this tool has. The tab order or your website is very important, and it has to be consistent with the content of your website, because visually impaired people or visually impaired people normally don't use a mouse, use a keyboard to navigate through your website, specifically the tab key. So they are going to tap between interactive elements, either buttons, links, forms, to navigate through your website. So if the tab order of your website is not consistent with the content, it's jumping around, then it's going to be a mess. So with this tool, what we can do is a map of those tab order. So once it is enabled, then you can start tabbing, and it's going to make a map with numbers of the tab order. And if you see that this is the correct order consistent with the content, well, then it's good. If not, then maybe you need to change the structure, the DOM structure, the order of the DOM structure. Maybe you have an element float right, if someone still uses floats, and then you want the tabbing is incorrect, then maybe you can fix it. As well, you can take a screenshot, maybe for reporting purposes, or maybe to have a history of your tab order. Wave is another extension that is very, very complete. You can find it in the extension tab, extension bar, and once you click, boom, a full test is done. You can see missing alternative text and images. You can see the order of heading levels, H1, H2, H3, which is very important as well for SEO. You can see the color contrast of all the text and buttons in the website. You can deactivate the whole styles of your website, so you can see really the DOM structure just plain. Or you can inspect the HTML, so you can see a bit more and dig into the HTML. So it is a very complete tool that you can install. Of course, I talked before about native development tools in your browser, and in this case, both Chrome and Firefox has simulators. You can find the Chrome Developer Tool Simulator and then rendering, and you can simulate vision deficiencies. And in this case, I'm simulating a blurry vision, so you can see a bit blurry. And in Firefox, what I'm simulating is a color blindness. So if you see the blue and the pink, and if I go back to the Chrome Developer Tools, you can see that the colors are different because I'm simulating a color blindness. So we need to understand that red, blue, and green is not red, blue, and green for everyone. So we cannot rely only on colors, for example, for error messages or login screen, and then only the border of the inputs are red. Well, red is not always red for everyone. Good. So pretty much those are the tips that I had for you. So again, test your code while you develop. You can use either Axe or a linter while you are in the code editor. Use the browser development tools. They are very powerful. You can use CLI tools in the terminal, and you can automate your accessibility tests. I show you today GitHub Actions, but if you have other CI/CD tool, then you can include it as well. And of course, do manual and simulation tests, either with a screen reader or with extension. If you want to read more about accessibility, I tend to write pretty much only about accessibility in my blog. I want to take advantage and recommend you a course official course done by the W3C. You can find it in edX. It's called Introduction to Web Accessibility. It is not a technical course, but it is a good introduction to start knowing more about the importance of web accessibility. And I want to leave with a couple of sentences that I think it summarizes the meaning of web accessibility. And this one said it's not just about disabled users being able to access your website, it's about everyone being able to access your website. At the beginning I said that there are a lot of types of impairments, permanent, situational. So we are all disabled. We don't know when it's going to be 0%, when it's going to be 20, when it's going to be 100%. It might be that you have your kid in one hand and you need to navigate the website using the tab key. You drop your computer, the screen is black, you don't have a second screen, you need to buy a flight, then you need to use a screen reader. You don't have your glasses with you, you don't have your mouse with you. So we need to understand that we are not doing accessible websites for disabled people because you don't know your users. Maybe you heard that before. You don't know who you are building websites for. And there's one true thing, you're not building websites or products for your company, you're building websites for humans, okay? So forget about what your company says, you're building products for other humans to use. So since we don't know, who is in the other side, we need to be sure that our products are accessible for everyone. And why I say that? Because accessibility is not a feature. It's never been, it's not now, it's not gonna be, it's not a feature, it's not a post-process. It doesn't cost money, it doesn't cost time. It's not a feature. We need to include accessibility in not only in our development process, but in the product design process. From the idea, from UX designers, PM, CEO, CTO, everyone needs to be involved. This is not a developer responsibility to include an alt text in an image. There are super good tools for designers. For example, Figma has accessibility annotations. A product manager needs to say, okay, I want this text in the button, but is this text meaningful enough? Because we have what we call invisible disabilities, cognitive disability, for example. Is continue, is save, delete enough? For you it is, because you know the context, but delete what? Continue to where? Those are the things that we need to think about when we, not only when we develop, because we are maybe transforming a design into a website, but the designer is going to tell you, use these colors because these colors are passing the color contrast, and maybe a PM, PO, whoever needs to specify the requirements, say, and we want this text because this text is meaningful enough. And if not, add the context. If continue is what you want in the button, use an ARIA label to add context for those who are using a screen reader. I tend to say that what we are lacking is education, or I used to say that what we are lacking is education, which is true. I don't know what framework or what are you developing in, and I don't care. Everything renders in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The rest is just grammar. You're writing different grammar than me, but everything is HTML and CSS. So we need to educate people about the basics. But what I say now lately is we need a cultural change. If you, as developer, are writing an image, is this image with alt? Okay, I need to include an alt. You're writing an anchor link with the content is a telephone number. Okay, screen reader is going to say 3,625,000. Okay, that's not good. ARIA label, call the support team. Okay, that's not education, because you know that images should have an alt, and you know that ARIA label exists. It's a cultural change where you say, this is not accessible, I'm going to make accessible. And if we get to that cultural change in the industry, because again, We are well educated. We just don't have this cultural change. And if we arrive there, then we are making good products. And if we are making good products, we are making good internet. And if we are making good internet, we are making good society. And that's it.